New Zealand has a great electoral system, but we can do even better. The process of electoral reform is far from over. There is still much to be done. We can be bold when we want to be. In the 90s, we embraced a massive electoral change with the adoption of mixed member proportional. And now it is time to continue the process of electoral reform. A major electoral reform package could include 7 electoral reform policies. 7 simple and straightforward electoral reforms. 7 common sense electoral policies. Policy 1. Ban big money political donations. Big money political donations allow the interests of the wealthy to dominate the political system. Big money political donations incentivize politicians to prioritize the interests of the wealthy people who can fund their campaigns or the campaigns of their opponents. Big money donations allow the wealthy to wield massively disproportionate political influence. This undermines democracy. Big money donations fund advertising, and advertising wins votes. The wealthy should not be able to pour their wealth on the scales to dictate an election result. Policy 2. Abolish the electoral threshold. The current electoral threshold of 5% could be abolished to make Parliament strictly proportional. If a party gets 2% of the vote, they should get 2% of the seats in Parliament. That is what fair representation means. Such a policy would empower minor political parties. This would enrich our democracy by giving people greater choice. This would force the larger parties to be more competitive. This would reduce socially destructive perceptions of powerlessness. Policy 3. Abolish first-past-the-post in the electorates. The first-past-the-post system lives on in the electorates. It should be replaced with ranked choice voting or approval voting. This would empower minor political parties. This would make minor political parties viable. This would enrich New Zealand's democracy by giving people more choice. This would push the larger parties to be more competitive. This would decrease socially destructive perceptions of powerlessness. Policy 4. Make voting mandatory. Mandatory voting increases the accuracy of political representation. Mandatory voting gives the government greater legitimacy by requiring it to possess a greater amount of support. Mandatory voting eliminates informal voter disenfranchisement and encourages political participation. Policy 5. Grant prisoners the right to vote. All permanent residents and citizens residing within New Zealand's prisons should be given the right to vote. The right to vote is not a reward for good behaviour. The right to vote cannot be taken away because the right to vote is not a privilege. The idea that the right to vote is a privilege undermines democracy. Depriving prisoners of the right to vote serves only to intensify the sense of alienation and isolation that causes so much crime. Policy 6. Make Election Day a public holiday. Making Election Day a public holiday would make it easier for people to vote. Such a policy also represents the celebration of democracy. Policy 7. Make citizen-initiated referenda binding. Under the present system, a sufficiently large petition can trigger a non-binding referendum. Such referenda should be binding. The government should be forced to act in accordance with the will of the people. That is what democracy means. The opinion of the people is not a suggestion. It is a command. The politicians must obey the will of the people, and that means that citizen-initiated referenda must be binding. It is my view that these reforms would significantly improve New Zealand's political system. These reforms would empower the people and make New Zealand more democratic. They would take power away from the political elite and put it back in the hands of the people. These reforms would enrich and strengthen New Zealand's democracy. It is time for a new wave of electoral reforms.